The drum wasn't on my pull list. That's what I kept coming back to after. If drum 7C had been on the pull list, someone from first shift would have found it weeks earlier, and the whole thing would have gone a different way. But 7C was a decommissioned power coupling housing, logged as empty, flagged for disposal whenever the disposal crew next came through, which at Korath Junction meant sometime before the decade was out. Nobody pulls a drum that's already been written off. Nobody except me, and only because I'd spent 12 years on the sub-level grid, and I could feel when something in the rack was wrong, the way a good mechanic can feel a gear about to strip through the vibration in the floor. 7C was warm. Not the ambient warm of a station whose heating coils ran under the sub-level plating. Warm the way a living thing is warm. I had my pry tool in my hand before I'd finished thinking about it. The seal came off in one pull. The drum's interior caught the overhead strip light, and I saw her. Small, pale as smelted tin. That was the Sovan coloring, the silver-skinned people from the far corridor settlements, and I'd seen a few come through the junction over the years. This one was folded into the drum's lower curve, with her knees against her chest, wearing a harness someone had rigged from cargo webbing, the kind we used for equipment tethering in zero-grav transfers. It was adjusted small. Adjusted for her. Whoever put her in had spent time on that harness, had made sure the straps weren't going to shift. I looked at her face, she looked at mine. Her eyes were the color of deep belt ore, gray shot through with faint silver, and they were enormous and entirely awake, and they were watching me with the focused stillness of something that had learned, in a very small body and a very short life, to make no sound at all. I said, "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. On the drum's inner wall, at the level where her head had rested, someone had scratched 8 characters in the notched angular script of old Sovan registration. A settlement code. A receiving address. I recognized the format. It was a resettlement waypoint marker, the kind families used when they were trying to send a child ahead to safe ground and couldn't file formal transit documentation without the paperwork landing in the wrong hands first. Somebody had sent her here on purpose. Somebody who knew Korath Junction took a long time to get around to its disposal inventory. I stood in the sub-level for about 4 seconds making the decision. Then I reached into the drum, worked the harness buckles loose the way the person who'd rigged them had intended them to be worked loose, and lifted her out. She weighed almost nothing. She fit against my chest with her head below my collarbone, and her hands folded against her own sternum, and I could feel her heart beating, fast, steady, the rhythm of something that was holding very still and waiting to find out what kind of world it had arrived in. "All right," I told her. "Let me think." The Varath Ore Consolidation Authority ran a quarterly audit skiff through Korath Junction. Their jurisdiction covered all unclaimed biological material discovered in the transit corridors, which was a polite way of saying that any living thing found aboard the junction without filed documentation got classified as transit drift, and transit drift got routed to their processing clearinghouses at the authority's discretion. I'd seen what that meant. You didn't get a second look at a clearinghouse. You got a number. Their audit skiff was due in 14 hours. I carried the child up to the maintenance office, sat her on the worktop, and pulled up the filing terminal. 12 years at Korath Junction teaches you things that aren't in the operator's manual. One of them is that the corridor maintenance code has a subclause 9 that most people have never read, buried in the appendices of the appendices, written by someone 40 years ago to cover a very specific edge case involving biologicals discovered in decommissioned cold transit equipment. The language was broader than it needed to be. It covered this. It required a biological discovery report filed within 2 hours, a provisional welfare hold under the Corridor Health and Safety Accord, which the Varath Ore Consolidation Authority had ratified themselves 11 years back. A biological under welfare hold could not be classified as transit drift, not without a formal contested claim hearing, minimum 30 days out. Their skiff was due in 14. I started filing. The child watched me from the worktop. She hadn't made a sound. I'd given her a cup of water, and she'd held it in both hands and drunk it in very small sips, watching me over the rim with those ore-gray eyes, and when the cup was empty, she set it down precisely at the worktop's edge, which struck me as the kind of careful you learn when you've spent time in enclosed spaces where spilling something has consequences. I'm filing you as a biological discovery under subclause 9, I told her. You're going to be a lot of paperwork for about the next 12 hours. After that, I'm going to call the resettlement address on the drum. Is that right? Is that where you're supposed to go? She looked at me for a long time. Then she gave one small, precise nod. Good, I said. Then that's what we're doing. I filed the biological discovery report at the 2-hour mark exactly. The provisional welfare hold 6 minutes later, with the report number as supporting documentation. Then I pulled the Corridor Health and Safety Accord from the archived charter library and cross-referenced subclause 9 against Article 14, which extended welfare hold protections to any biological in the care of a licensed station employee, and filed that cross-reference as a supplementary attachment. Then I found the resettlement waypoint code from the drum wall in the Sovan resettlement directory and transmitted a contact request to the receiving coordinator. She called back in 40 minutes. Her name was Osa Vel. Her voice was steady and professional, and underneath it, about 3 words in, she started crying, very quietly, in the way of someone who has been waiting a long time for a specific call. She's safe, I said. How long to reach the junction? 18 hours, 20 at the outside. I'll hold 4 past that if I have to. The welfare hold is filed and active. Come through the maintenance access. Don't come through the main transit floor. Understood. A pause. Her name is Vey. I looked at the child on the worktop. I know, I said, which wasn't true, but felt like the right answer. The authority auditor's name was Dast Koreth, young, neat, very certain of his charter jurisdiction. He arrived 11 hours later with a handheld terminal and an expression that said he'd already found the drum in the transit manifest. He took one look at my filing stack, and his expression changed. A biological discovery report, he said. Filed at the 2-hour mark, I said. Time-stamped. The provisional welfare hold is cross-referenced to Article 14 of the Corridor Health and Safety Accord, which your authority ratified in the 11th year of the Varath Consolidated Charter. The biological cannot be classified as transit drift while the hold is active. Contested claim hearing, minimum 30 days out. He looked at his terminal. He typed something. He looked at it again. This is irregular, he said. Subclause 9 is in the appendices, I said. Appendix C, Section 4. It's 40 years old. It's still charter. He was quiet for a while, reading. Behind me, Vey was in the maintenance office with the grid mapping tablet I'd given her, drawing small shapes with focused, meticulous attention, the kind of drawing a child does when she is working very hard at not being afraid. The holding period, he started. 30 days, I said. The resettlement contact is in transit. If she arrives within the holding period, the hold closes. Authority has no further jurisdiction. Article 14, subsection 3. He read it. He looked at me. He looked at his terminal as if it might have changed. It hadn't. I'll need a copy of the full filing stack. Already transmitted to your office, I said. I sent it when I filed the cross-reference. He left without saying anything else. Osa Vel arrived 19 hours later, through the maintenance access. She was a tall Sovan woman, with the same silver-gray coloring as Vey, and when she came through the door and saw the child on the worktop with the grid tablet in her lap, she stopped walking entirely for about 3 seconds. Then Vey looked up. What happened after that wasn't mine to watch. I went down to the sub-level and pulled the rest of my rack list, because it still needed doing, and the junction didn't stop for anything. When I came back up, they were gone. The grid tablet was still on the worktop. Vey had left it there. On the screen was the last thing she'd drawn, a series of small repeated shapes I didn't have the language to read, Sovan notation, neat and deliberate. She'd been drawing the same cluster of symbols over and over across the whole surface of the screen, filling it in from left to right the way you fill a log. I didn't know what the symbols meant, but I recognized the shape of it. It was the same 8 characters she'd arrived with, scratched into the wall of the drum. The same address, over and over. She'd known where she was going the whole time. I saved the image to my maintenance log and closed the screen and went back to work. Drum 7C got pulled for disposal the following week. I logged it as empty. It was.